I gotta say, I really like what I'm seeing right now. So this chapter, so it's really funny. So when the chapter initially came out, I looked, obviously at the raw chapter. I bought it off the app, went through it, and not a lot went down in terms of the plot. It was mostly just, primarily continuation of the conversation between Kirin and Laxus, and then there was a little bit with, Lucy and Natsu's group, and then over with Wendy at the very end. But for the most part, it was set on Laxus and Kirin. And before I got like the fan translations, obviously that's not the official ones yet, but before I got to the fan translations, like, okay, look, it's looking good. It's mostly just going to be like a chapter to talk about Kirin's magic and whatnot. But I actually really like his personality after we got a just showing of how he behaves. Now, one of the things I mentioned about Suzaku is that Mishima will make it very clear when he likes a character more than your average one, because he gives them more sides to them. They're not just like, some like battle hungry bad guy. Look at Suzaku, his funnier side as well as the kind of more humble side we have with Haku. He has that just generally being way more childish and, a little bit nicer. Granted, he's a little kid, so it makes sense. We don't have anything from Misaki yet, but Kirin already is looking really cool, and just like his personality and like pretty much just how he's going about like conversing with Laxus as they're fighting. I think he's just looking really cool in pretty much the entirety of how he's demonstrating here, as well as his magic. His magic is super cool. I'm hoping that we can get like an actual name for his dragon slaying type soon. I mean, it could literally just be the atmosphere dragon slayer, and I'd be fine with it. But I mean, it's cool regardless. And I probably am going to do a video on Kirin's magic, but I want to, soon. I want to wait until at least we have a couple techniques or something, maybe after his first fight, because the way that it works is actually really interesting in the concept. And I'll talk about it, as we're going, but I just wanted to first go over the general kind of, first off, the vibe. You have Laxus. We know Laxus. We've had him since pretty much the start of the story, and obviously knowing how powerful he is. We from the readers, we know about Kirin, but we you're gonna have a bias towards Laxus based off of having way more time and understanding of Laxus and his abilities. But obviously Kirin is super hyped right now, and on top of that, he's looking really clean in this fight already. Because Mishima, one thing that you gotta remember as well with the series is, there's a point where how a fight not necessarily will go, but that say that with Nineheart, you knew him and Natsu in a fight, once Natsu gets up close and is able to actually start attacking him, it was going to be over, because Nineheart is a summoner. He's a classic caster and a summoner. He's not like Lucy, who diverged from the way that summoners in the fairy tale universe kind of act and behave. Lucy decided to fight side by side him, and then was able to build up durability and resistance the old-fashioned way by taking damage and getting hurt, whereas Nineheart seemed to be more kind of like Kirin or Angel, where it was more of just abiding by the benefits of casting and summoning. But because of that, they kind of screwed him more. Whereas with Dragon Slayer fights have always been a brutal slugfest. These are wizards who specialize in close combat, head smashing fights. And on top of everything else, the most consistent thing with the magic of dragon slaying, because slayers in general, you can look at the durability and stuff of other slayers and stuff, and we don't know too much about the backstory of the origin of the other two. God slaying magic is obviously the most unknown out of the three, but what we do know about dragon slaying is the dragons, because of their bodies, were part of the problem with fighting them in general, how durable they were, the resistance to magic and stuff. But because of dragon slaying magic, they slowly get dragon-like bodies, and that results in them pretty much all being really durable. The only dragon slayer that I would assume doesn't have a considerable level of durability is Kiria, comparison to the others, because Kiria logically would focus more offensively, and she doesn't really have any strong durability feats. Her best one really is getting hurt by that attack that Urza put her way back on the boat. But I mean, she took damage, but it's not like she was defeated. But obviously we know that in an actual fight Urza would win. once she figured out Kiria's hypnosis ability that she has. A good trick, but obviously once you figure out to get past that, that's something that Urza can very easily do with like her fake eye and stuff. But Kirin in this chapter, like I said, he's just looking really cool in his personality. We got a funny moment from him in this, but like a cool, badass, dark, funny moment, which again was really cool. And I mentioned with Suzaku's funnier parts, like him like thinking like being naked is hilarious. That's to the point where he can barely contain himself. And then you see Haku's more kind of like silly kid, more friendly side. And then here we have Kirin, who's like this badass fucking dude carrying around a coffin. He's like, all right, I don't know what I should do with you because how big you are. Maybe I should chop you up and kind of put you in my pieces. And that'd be messy and gross, so never mind, I don't want to do that. I like that he has a funny side to him on top of being extremely badass looking and just looking scary. The monocle is definitely like one of the nicest touches I think of his design. It's just such a like a small thing that was like, I feel like Mishima just decided to put that on there and just it added such a slick extra level to him. But while Laxus is talking to him, they're gonna have normal banter. He's like, oh no, the one that's gonna be going in there is you. And Kirin's just like, me? I never considered that. No one's ever said that to me before. And I kind of like you. And he ends up snapping his finger, and then you get this kind of weird little. I would imagine it's not like a bubble in reality. Like, I feel like it's just the way that it looks. I would assume that if you were actually there, it would you would know from the magic. It's something that you would be able to kind of detect as a wizard because of your, magic sensing and stuff. And if you have the speed to actually react to his attacks, you would kind of sense it more like that and see it based off of, magic sensing, just by how his magic seems to work with manipulation and distortion of the atmosphere, which is really cool. He's got like this. It's not the same as Minerva's magic, but like kind of like how territory works to a degree, how it applies to essentially the whole AoE of her area, and that seems to be what he does. Obviously, the fundamentals of how his magic works and how Minerva's magic works is different, but Kirin's is cool just from the fact that it's all from a dragon slaying magic, because dragon slaying, as I mentioned, like they are primarily high durability, high physical offense fighters. They have the dangerous ability to regain stamina and magic with their ability to eat their own attribute. But besides that, that's for the most part we're going to get with fighting a Dragon Slayer. Stats and stuff can obviously vary depending on the character and whatnot. But one thing that is important of fighting a Dragon Slayer is each Dragon Slaying type, dragon in general, because the Dragon Slayers are literally just kind of like copying whatever dragon of origin theirs is from to a degree. They're imitating it in various forms, but they have a special perk with each type. Like Natsu can burn magic. You have paralysis with lightning. You have people like Rogue and Scullion who could turn into their attribute. Special stuff like that. And it looks like I would imagine this isn't Kirin's, because this to me, and when I was talking about like gauging his magic in general, like this isn't something we have a full grasp on, but like the easiest way I can describe it is one thing that a Slayer can do, and it's not just Dragon Slayer, it's like Slayers in general, is they can clad themselves in their attribute. They can use their ability to pretty much put it on themselves. Obviously, we've seen Natsu put fire on himself a million times, Laxus with lightning. Wendy's with wind is more kind of like swirling around her body and stuff instead of kind of just directly wearing it. But with Kirin, by the way that his ability works, and I know like the Dragon Eaters are different because their attributes are all weird. Curious somewhat considering she puts it on her hands like these cool energy blades. But for the most part, the way that Kirin would work it is instead the atmosphere itself is his weapon. So pretty much everything around him, and that's evident in when Laxus says that his magic is invisible. So I'm guessing when he also like looked at the attack, it's drawn like that visually for us, but I think it's more again like a magic thing to where he's not really seeing it. It's because of his ability to sense magic and and his combat skills that he was able to detect it and pretty much be able to process and fathom what was going on. But it's also really cool because you see him, like Laxus shoots a lightning bolt at him, shoots this big lightning bolt, just a straight hand out blast of lightning right at Kirin, and Kirin just lifts his hand up and kind of like flicks it away, kind of like Margear did back with Sting's roar, and that's when he reveals like his magic compresses and distorts the atmosphere. And I'm wondering, now that we have an idea of his magic, in the next chapter, like, could we just get a statement of what his Slayer attribute is? If not, I just want to get more displays of what it can do, so I can at least try and get a better estimation of what exactly his is. I feel like at least right now, Atmosphere Dragon is the easiest thing to say, considering the chapter is called Lightning and Atmosphere, so I would assume with Laxus being lightning, that Atmosphere just makes the most sense for Kirin. So let's say it could be something completely like Sidestep with some weird naming convention that's something that is like the atmosphere is just part of it, but it's actually something far greater and some crazy, even more broken ability. I feel like the atmosphere is fine. I think that'd be really cool. It's just like this dragon that pretty much controls the magic and energy in the atmosphere from just a large scale, pretty much. And we're probably going to get to see a little bit more of that in the next chapter. I'm guessing we're going to see part of that fight, even though it ends with Wendy. I don't imagine we're going to get at least we're not going to get a glimpse into this one. Like, if Mishima spends too long on in this fight, it's definitely going to either be a fight we don't really see that much of and Laxus might get off screen, or it'll be like one where we come back and Laxus is way more damaged and way more getting pressed than this chapter. Like, if it's just looking way worse for him. I feel like Mishima could easily have chapter 100 reveal that Laxus lost to Kirin. I would probably prefer coming back to it and then maybe having like 98 and 99 be a fight and then Laxus loses in 100 or something. That's just something that I want. I think it'd be really cool for Kirin, but also builds up Kirin. He's like, and I really like Kirin's character because while he's talking to him, and you just get a couple like cool moments where he like Laxus getting hit, but he's still coming in, and he goes to try and punch Kirin, and you just see this part where his lightning is just not moving. And it reminds me of Margear, like when Margear, well, Natsu went to attack him, and Margear's just general kind of force field that he put up using his power. I guess more of like just like an energy kind of field push. Again, he didn't have force field specifically, but you know kind of like what I mean. Just the force kind of pressed him back, and you see like again this Laxus go in, stop by this invisible force, and then just kind of like hover there in the air as his attack tries to push for a moment right before Kirin is just like, yeah, that attack's not going to scratch me. Nope. And again, this is something I really liked. So there's one of those tropes of when you have like a power like this where you know characters can't touch you. Look at Midnight or say like Satoru Gojo, where it's like a character has this some form of ability that just makes it so you can't land attacks on them. And especially when they bring it up where it's just like, you know, you're never going to land an attack on me. You know, that's just a character trope when it comes to that specific power. It's kind of like how high regen characters don't bother dodging shit, and then that can easily screw them over if you run into a Haxon of character. But he says the whole like, okay, so you're not going to be able to hit me, and then he's like, and he just kind of like swings his hand, throws Laxus to the ground. Laxus is bleeding. He's like, well, and that also means that every one of my opponents is going to go in the coffin. And there's a really cool moment from that, because when he flexes like, you know, they're never going to do damage to me, Laxus is just like able to pretty much deduce a little bit of it, because what Kirin is essentially doing is the entire, like in the atmosphere, everything around him and just the air is essentially like the idea of Natsu cladding himself in his fire. Not the same thing, but kind of like in the idea where he just has control over pretty much all of this. So anything in the air, in the atmosphere, he can manipulate to move. Again, think of it kind of like how Midnight, how he would use his reflecting magic to move something in a certain direction. That's essentially what Kirin is doing. But instead of it just being like, I have reflector magic, I'm applying it in my hand, it's more of like everything in the area is already his atmosphere, so he's just manipulating it as he sees fit, as it's already up. But again, that's only doing it of stuff in the atmosphere, the air. So Laxus, what he does is he, as we've seen him do before, he shoots lightning from the ground. He pretty much just charges it up, puts it in, and just zaps him from right there, and we see damage from him. And again, this is cool because it was one of those parts where it's like you can logically in that center like it'd be like, oh man, how am I gonna hit this character? But just being smart about with your moves, and obviously Laxus being an experienced fighter was able to figure out a way to just directly damage him and think around his powers, which again is really smart. But after that point, Kirin has a really good part in just like addressing him looking pretty spooky as Laxus like, oh, you know, he said that these attacks aren't gonna hit me. You see the question mark. He's just looking at boss with his hat on, the shadow over his eyes, his monocle. And then Laxus, you know, shoots the lightning from above the ground. You see a little bit of damage on Kirin, and then you get a named attack. One thing that's a little weird, and it's not a bad thing, but it's weird that the Black Dragon Slayer Knights don't have at least from what we've seen, Dragon Slayer named attacks the same, because none of Suzaku's attacks are like Sword Sate Dragon's attack. And here we have Kirin just using this attack, Atmos Distortion. So it's like, is he going to use a dragon ability? Like, how is that? Because Wraith didn't really do any of that either. He mostly just kind of like manipulated his base stuff and then just used, you know, Spirit and Soul Dragon energy to attack Natsu. But as they're fighting, there's again another really cool moment where Kirin is caught off guard. Well, also a feat for Laxus. Laxus brings out his red lightning, and he's like, my red lightning cuts through the atmosphere. So I'm wondering exactly how that works. I assume that with the red lightning, it's on top of a power boost, but like it's also speed and stuff, just because it's, even though it's like a buffed version of lightning, it's obviously something that applies to Laxus the same way as like fire with Natsu. So it would logically give him a higher, this kind of stat boost than his normal lightning, and then we see it applied here as like he's just punching right through. We actually get like a good visual of him going through the atmosphere. It's like there's these rings around him as he's going right through, and he's able to damage Kirin. He uses his whole Megaton Red Lightning, you know, the Raikou one, the one that he used to defeat Wall. He used it on Urza during their fight, and it was like a half-second worry. It's like you see the damage on Kirin, blood's coming out the mouth, and you have one of those panels where it's like he lands on the ground, and you have like Scully out of Mad Mode being like, it can't be, is he? And it's like, this is one of those parts you think like maybe a character either is defeated or if it's set up to be like maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But Kirin immediately gets up, and he's like, you know what? This is a surprise. Like, this Fairy Tail Guild has a guy like you. This is pretty nice, because if this is true, if this keeps up, I really might wind up in my own coffin. And he's like, I like you, so I think it's time for me to get a little serious. And so far we've seen whenever Ueda has one of these panels where it's like this close-up wicked smile and then this kind of extra weird effect, like the way that they're like he has the coloring of the hat. Think of it similar to like what happened with Celine. Every time we see like one of these style drawings of the character's face, they go pretty hard off. So I'm guessing again, whenever we see Kirin next, it's either going to be directly after this point where they are right now, and we see it continue, or Laxus, the next time we see him, is probably going to be really pressed, and Kirin's going to be winning, I would imagine, by far. Because once he starts flexing, and then one of the things that I was going to talk about before I ended up kind of going on a rant about Kirin's character, but when Laxus feels his magic, he's like, it's just like old man Gildarts. So here's the thing. People are bringing up like they're just kind of saying it's comparative to Gildarts. I don't think so. Because he's not saying it's as powerful as Gildarts. He's not saying this is like on a level with Gildarts. He's saying it's like Gildarts' magic. It's like, what's this magic power? It's like Gildarts'. And in a similar one, think of what happened with Nineheart, with Irene. Because he was able to figure out Urza's connection to Irene through her magic by thinking like, oh, you know, it's similar to Irene's. I think Mishima is definitely doing something here for Gildarts, because one thing that he already said Sting, Rogue, and Gildarts would show up in 100 Years Quest. I feel like this is a logical place then to bring in Gildarts at some point, some connection to Kirin. Like, I was talking to my stream, like, Kirin could be revealed to literally be named Kirin Clive. I could see Kirin be related to Gildarts. It would make sense. We don't know anything about Gildarts' backstory. And if it's like Gildarts is from some really powerful family, I could see it. Or maybe this is his brother. Maybe this is some old rival. Maybe they had the same teacher. There's definitely something in there that can very strongly, kind of tie into Gildarts and give us a lot for Gildarts. This could go really crazily. If Mishima was actually doing something with it. If the people think it's just like, oh, comparing to Gildarts is powerful, alright, that's just like, well, then that's not really that as interesting. It just shows he's strong. Whereas I think it has more to do with some form of actual connection to Gildarts. Because, like, what's the point of bringing up Gildarts specifically if it's literally just about a power level thing? I think it has to do with the feeling that he gets from his magic versus Gildarts' magic. But afterwards, it was kind of just like a further continuation of what was going on with Lucy Natsu and their group. There was a small part, actually, I was actually really hyped because there was something that was in the chapter that I'm so curious for Lucy and Leo now. So just real quick, then like Lucy ends up summoning Ares. Ares makes a bunch of the wool. The wool is so underused from the fact that it drains somebody's will to fight. It is kind of broken in just that application where it is like a low degree of hacks, but it's still a hacks. But just to kind of like confine it and hold it still, where Leo goes and uses Regulus, he's using his light to like concentrate it into a beam. And he pretty much makes like a little laser beam. And granted, it's like a tiny laser beam. It takes a minute to set this thing on fire. But this is plushy Leo. So I imagine real Leo can make like a laser beam too. Just makes sense based off of the, you know, his actual feat and how he uses magic. And it is a type of light magic. But I'm just wondering if he's going to do that later. That was just something that was in the chapter I actually really liked. Because it was just like, can he shoot lasers? Like, that would be so useful to, like, his moveset and to Lucy's if he could make concentrated laser beams to shoot. But then Natsu's, like, mad over what's going on with Haku, and he wants to go fight him. And there's a part where it's, like, when he's, like, saying how he's, like, he wants to show him how scared grown-ups can be, and Happy's like, you're a grown-up's like, yeah, I mean, Natsu's in his 20s. Like, Natsu had to be around 18 at the start. It's been around 3 years in time for him for what he's experienced from his POV, so he should at least be in his 20s. But at the very end of the chapter, there was a setup meeting between Haku and Wendy. So here's the thing. This is a matchup everybody was theorizing. This is like when we went in the Grand Magic Games and we saw Shelly. It was like, okay, that's a Wendy opponent. That is like someone set up specifically for Wendy. It's just like the only other young kid there. So it's like, it's something that people expected the second we saw Haku. But here's the thing. I do not think there's going to be a fight. One, in terms of power levels, Haku should beat Wendy relatively easy. I don't really see what Wendy is going to do to Haku if Haku decides to actually fight her. Like, the only thing Wendy really would have is, like, enchant utility. Like, if she could kind of, like, figure out some, like, weird combo or some setup to kind of either hold him off or do something, but I don't think she could. She could prove me wrong on that, but it's just that Haku obviously scales so much higher and he's already broken. But I feel like on top of that, in terms of Haku's hacks, like turning people into plushies, I think Wendy can undo that. I think Wendy could use Do Zero or Re-Raise or any of her status effect canceling abilities and just null it out. So I don't think it's going to be either a fight, and I don't think it's going to come down to Haku's ability to turn things into plushies. I personally think it's going to be a character thing, because with those two options out of the way, the other thing that obviously comes out with Haku is Haku's kid-like personality of actually being a young boy. And unless he's like an adult that looks young, I'm pretty sure he's just a kid. But I personally am, like, my strongest guess, based off of knowing Mishima and based off of the character that we're seeing, I'm guessing that we're going to end up having pretty much a romance thing set up. Like, I can easily see Haku developing a crush on Wendy, because again, I don't see it going either way of a fight or plushie hacks fight, because I think both of them, either Haku wins or Wendy just cancels out the effect. So I think logically it would come down to that, because he is ultimately like a young boy, and we've seen that he's not somebody who wants to really like get aggressive and fight, at least yet. So I feel like with Wendy, it's gonna be like, just, you know, Wendy's polite always to the people who are nice to her. So I feel like the way that she is combined with how Haku is, it's going to be one of those things where even though there's a clear winner if you gauge it by power levels, that it's going to come down to like how the characters interact specifically between each other, how they as individuals kind of are going to be set up in this next confrontation. So I don't see it going poorly for Wendy. I really am pretty confident in the idea of Haku just developing like some form of crush on Wendy, and that being like an ongoing thing between them. I can see it. I think it'd be pretty funny. But other than that, we didn't get any Misaki. We didn't see anything with Kiria, Urza, Gajil, what's going on with Gray. Only the little bit of Natsu and Lucy. It's the Kirin stuff that's obviously the big hype. I really want to see more of Kirin's abilities and more of just his dragon attribute. His roar would be crazy. I actually would. Last thing I want to mention, just because I thought about it. What if his roar, kind of like think of it kind of like Law from One Piece. How his room, it's like he has a bubble. We see it visually, but it's like, imagine that as his area effect, but Kirin's roar is just everything in his range. So it's not like a beam. It's not like a big frontal cone. It's literally just this giant shockwave that kind of like he roars and it just affects all the magic in the area. It's just this big billowing kind of like pulse of power within within his AoE. I think that'd be amazing. Like, he's already looking really cool. His personality, his design, his magic, feats, everything about the Black Dragon Slayer Knight so far has been really good. I've mentioned I've loved all of the Dragon Eaters. I think they've all been really cool and really interesting. Even like Kiria and Ibaru, I think are fun characters and enjoyable for what they bring to the table. But when it comes to like the Black Dragon Slayer Knights, like Mishima is just giving them all like big spotlight as bad guys and like giving them all something really good to do. And I think that's fantastic. And on top of that, making them more fleshed out and giving more personality to them just makes them more likable on top of that, because I don't think any of them are going to die in this arc, so I really want to get used to them. I want to like understand these guys. I don't think anybody's going to die on either side in this one. It just doesn't seem like that kind of game, but we'll see. I mean, something crazy could happen, but I personally want all of these guys to live and then have, join up and fight Selene. I would love this Diablos and Fairy Tail team up to fight Selene. I know a lot of people theorize that. I'm one of the people on board with that, so we'll see how this plays out. Regardless of which, Kirin is looking extremely crisp. We'll see how his power like actually turns out. I'm fine with just Atmosphere Dragon. I mean, that's just badass. That just sounds so cool. And again, think of literally just this roar where you just see like you just see a shockwave. Like if you were off from the distance, it's just a pulse, and then everything in this bubble is just blasted with power pretty much. But anyway, other than that, comment below, thumbs up the video, but friend, like button, subscribe button, and check out my other videos. But than that, everybody's already subscribed. Thank you all for listening. Bye.